Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part two of my screencast. I'm Dave Liptak, and I did my presentation on people with disabilities in rural areas. We left off with a story about Lin Hui, who is a 20-year-old young Chinese man who had a stroke several days after he was born, and his his mom and the rest of his family they live excuse me, on a small farm in China, and they live in extreme poverty. They barely have enough to get by, and the health clinic there isn't enough to give them what resources they need to support Lin Hui's needs. And Lin Lin Hui's older brother Lin Wei, sometimes their mom says that it's actually a good thing that he moved away because he would actually abuse Lin Hui growing up. And this though it is really sad, I actually didn't find this surprising because I know that the textbook said that people with disabilities often can be the target of abuse from one of their family members, and people with disabilities also have a 4 to 10 times greater chance of being abused during their lifetime compared to a non-disabled person. That's according to the Disability Studies Quarterly.org. 75% of the disabled Chinese population lives in rural areas. This trend lines up with the overlying theme of this paper, but why might a statistic from an article published from a Chinese government not be credible? I mentioned this. It's not really something that I had trouble with or a hard time. I mentioned this though because with the Chinese government having the tendency to censor a lot of their material and redistribute it and distort a lot of the facts that come out of the media. It even goes so far as to interfere with the publishing of academic journals. I don't doubt this statistic, so to say, but I wouldn't necessarily believe something coming from that's published from China. Um, Moving on, another survey on the same topic of abuse. This was in the country Bangladesh, where a survey of 226 women found that 84% of them had been abused by one of their partners during some point of their lifetime, including emotional, sexual, or physical abuse. That's that's a really high number, and when you think about social factors that put people more at risk, ask why would a person with a disability have a greater chance of being abused? Some reasons are the perpetrator views the disabled person as an easy target, as a person who wouldn't tell on them, or they view them as an easy and vulnerable target who, even if they would tell on the abuser, um, historically the tendency has to not do much about the abuse of people with disabilities. And it's really sad, especially considering it can even come from other family members, as the text had said. Moving on, a 2019 study in Karnataka. This is in India, by the way. This is on the southern tip of India. Found that out of 290 children aged 5 to 15 who had disabilities, 62% of them had feeding difficulties. A lot of the children during this study had what's called cerebral palsy, and other conditions such as autism, and as a result of this, it makes feeding hard. The problem that they found in these countries was that there's a lack of knowledge regarding how to feed these children. They found that the mothers aren't properly equipped with resources they need to be informed on. Sometimes the food needs to be modified, or sometimes they just don't know proper feeding technique for children with disabilities. And the article put a big emphasis on teaching mothers the correct techniques. I also added on to that in my research paper. I also said, hey, if you're going to teach the mothers, might as well teach the fathers too, because with adhering to a specific gender role, I had mentioned that sometimes it can lead to exclusivity or um, exclusivity, and what we're trying to strive for here is inclusivity. This is concerning feeding a very big problem, especially considering where children get their food nourishment that they require. Feeding difficulties were often because of mothers not knowing proper feeding technique or proper food modification practice for a person with a disability. And the article also placed a strong emphasis on teaching the mothers the correct technique. People from a country that historically has experienced a lot of child poverty, such as India, and food scarcity problems, still experience hunger even when food is available. As a result of being disadvantaged in so many ways, people with disabilities have lower life expectancies than the non-disabled population. This is the result of lower levels of education and, in terms of less developed countries, inadequate health resources. They are often talked out of lifetime opportunities before they even try them. Only just recently has focus been redirected on what is wrong with the infrastructure and how can it be fixed rather than what is wrong with the person. People with disabilities in rural, less developed countries are especially disadvantaged. The higher likelihood of being in poverty leaves them less prepared to cope with either a disability or chronic disease, two things that they are both much more likely to have. Care for these problems in these areas are less sophisticated than that of a more populated area. The impact of stigma has kept many people with disabilities from being included in life, and pity does not do much to help them. The cost of living is rising, and this needs to be reflected in the budgets allocated to groups and services supporting people with disabilities. This paper based a lot of its reasoning off the social versus medical model constructions, and now has a redirecting of thinking about what needs to be rehabilitated is many times necessary. People with disabilities need more opportunities to coincide and live in accord with everyone else. If this happens, there would not be so much exclusionary stigma or mere pity. More programs like Project Search and the Outback models, which serve people with disabilities in rural areas. And lastly, understand how this demographic population is impacted by the social forces and experiences. What are some things that causes delay in rural areas? I just wanted to end off with this question to provoke some thought. What are some things that cause delays in rural areas for things besides people with disabilities? Like what other things? Excuse me. What other social forces hold people back in time? And I just wanted to conclude with saying thank you for your time and watching my presentation.